Today's video is brought to you by Skillshare. In our previous videos, we've been looking at budget-friendly blacksmithing, what it might look like to spend around $500 on some very basic tools, hammer, tongs, little anvil, little single burner forge, the fuel to run the forge, some materials to get started. In our last video, we looked at making some very simple items, things that you might be able to sell. And this is my little pot of gold of all the things that I made. Now there were 60 of these that were made from a single 20-foot piece of 3/8 round bar. If you haven't watched that video, I'll link to it up here, but do wait till the end of this one before you go over there. Now I also have a few other things that I've made, test pieces, practice pieces, some one-offs that I decided not to do more of, but all of this stuff has the potential to be sold. And today I want to talk about what some of that potential might be, where you might be able to sell this, and some of the issues that you might find with different places that you would sell your work. And these things apply whether you're doing these simple projects or whether you're doing fancier projects, custom knives, fireplace tools, something like that. Now if you're doing real high-end stuff, architectural work, that's usually custom made and you've made an arrangement with a customer before you ever make the piece. So we really are talking about things that you might take to a craft show or sell online. I do want to reiterate that you don't need to sell this stuff if your budget allows you to buy the tools and the equipment that you need to get started in blacksmithing, and you can continue on. And if that budget's available, selling this stuff is just an added bonus or an added distraction depending on how you look at it. So I'm not sure that I'd worry about it unless you really need to fund this. But in all honesty, this is essentially what I've been doing for the last 38 years now. I started off with very simple equipment, everything that I could manage to scrape together and afford. And then I had to sell work to be able to afford to buy more things. And as I sold some of my work, I was able to reinvest that money into more tools, more materials, expand my shop, expand my capabilities. Then I could sell more things and slowly build on that. And the shop that you see in most of my videos today, with a ribbon burner forge, an induction forge, hydraulic press, 2 power hammers, fly press, all of that stuff was funded through this method over the long term. This is not a quick payoff. It's going to build little bits here, little bits there, but over time, that's what it can do for you. So if that's what you want to do and you at some point want to turn this into a career, the possibility is there. But it's also a great way just to fund your hobby so you don't end up spending the rent money on tools and equipment. So where do we sell these simple hooks, bottle openers, key rings, things like that we've made? Somebody actually asked, will people buy this stuff? The answer is yes. Etsy is full of this stuff. eBay is full of it. People sell it at craft shows. And those are certainly some of the places you're going to want to try and sell your work. Truth is, there is a market for this. People will buy this as long as you're doing good work and your prices are fair for the work you're doing. Not cheap. Just don't undercut yourself on prices. I'll talk about what I priced all these things at before we get to the end of the video. Now the obvious thing is to sell to friends, family, and co-workers. That's just word of mouth. You take this stuff to your regular day job and say, hey, you want to see what I made in the blacksmith shop? And some of those people are going to say, I would love to have that. I've got a place in my house that needs some hooks to hang the kids' backpacks for school, maybe hang a coat or a hat. Maybe they want to hang some skillets in the kitchen or something like that. And some of this stuff may sell by word of mouth that way. And that's certainly the easiest. There's no overhead in selling it that way. But unfortunately, that's a very limited market. If you try and push that too much, you're liable to piss off your friends, your family, and your coworkers. So you have to tiptoe a little bit lightly around some of that. But in the early days, you may sell a dozen or so hooks. They also make great gifts. So if you're doing this around the holiday season or somebody's birthday, these are good things that you can give at gifts and save the money that you would have spent buying a gift otherwise. So there are some possibilities there. The next obvious thing, and is probably fairly simple if it's available to you, is selling at local craft shows, festivals, fairs, things like that. And that's an in-person arrangement. You're going to have to give up some of your time to sit behind a table and sell these things at some of those events. The advantage to that is you get to talk one-on-one, you get feedback from people whether they like it, don't like it. Try not to give too much credence to the people who says, well, I could make that for $3. I don't know why you're charging $10 for it, because one, they can't, and two, they never would if they could. But there are expenses involved with selling in person at most of these events. There are going to be table fees, booth fees, setup costs, whatever it is that the event charges you so it makes money. So it might cost you $20 or $30 at a little community craft show. It might cost you a few $100s at a bigger event. Heck, some of these big national events, it might cost a few $1,000s. So I don't recommend trying to go to those really big events. Stay with the community events. If you have to travel and it's too far to commute from home for a multi-day event, there's going to be travel expenses, there's going to be lodging, there's going to be meal expenses, and that all adds to the cost of selling, and you have to sell this stuff for a price that is going to recoup those expenses. Exactly what those expenses are, I can't tell you. I know for us, we're going to be traveling to Iowa later this summer, and we're going to set up at a show there. It's a 2-day show. The space for the show is not very expensive. It'll probably be around $100, something like that. But there's going to be fuel, there's going to be meals, there's going to be at least 6 nights in hotels between the show and the travel days. So it's going to be rather expensive. It's going to be $1,000, $1,500 just to show up at the show, whether we sell anything or not. So that's something to consider for bigger shows or shows you have to travel. But the local summer art shows, festivals, craft shows before Christmas, all that kind of stuff, not a bad place to go and sell some of this stuff. I would like to take a moment and thank Skillshare for sponsoring today's video and making it possible for me to share this information with you today. Skillshare is an online learning community with thousands of classes to choose from. I've been a member and learning with Skillshare for probably 5 years now, and that really helps me present a better product here on YouTube for you to watch. As you look at selling some of this work, Skillshare has some classes on how to sell at craft shows, art shows, things like that. There are classes on how to sell on Etsy and website design, and every bit as important, classes on product photography, because if you're selling online, you're going to have to get really good pictures of some of your work, and just having a few little tips and tricks really pays off in the long run. One advantage Skillshare has over other online platforms is you're not paying for a specific class. You're paying for a membership that allows you access to all of the classes they have. And if you start a class and you say, this isn't what I really thought it was, but I want to try this one over here, you just take the other class and then maybe you come back to this one and you're not out any extra money by taking more than one class. You can take as many classes as you want. You can go back and review the classes as many times as you want. First 1,000 people that use the link in the video description will get a 1-month free trial of Skillshare. Now for me, I generally sell most of my work online these days. I don't do as many in-person shows. I find the time spent doing things in person isn't always a good use of my time. I'd rather spend that time in the shop making things, and then I sell the things online. In the past, I've sold things on my own website, and that really works pretty well, but it's not perfect. It's something you have to maintain, and as technology changes and things improve, you have to revamp your website and reevaluate it, and that's stuff that I was never really all that good at. But if you have a website, you want to maintain a website, that's not a bad way to go. The downside to a website is that when you're new and you're just starting out, nobody knows you have a website, nobody's looking for your website, so it's going to be a lot harder to get traffic for people that are actually going to buy. Now for me, I generally sell through Etsy. Etsy is bringing the traffic in. People are there looking for this type of stuff. They're not looking for you specifically in most cases. They're just searching for forged hooks or forged bottle openers or decorative hooks or coat hooks or something like that. And those are things that you need to put in the description of the item and in the keywords so people can find your stuff. But Etsy then manages your inventory, and they have a discounted shipping system, so you pay less to ship through Etsy than you would if you were just taking stuff to the post office and shipping it yourself. So for those reasons, I kind of like Etsy. What I don't like about Etsy is that it's getting bigger and bigger, and it's a little bit harder to get noticed. Their fees have gone up over the last few years, so it does cost you more to sell through Etsy than it does your own personal website. But it's not outrageous, and I think the fact that they handle all that inventory stuff, help you deal with shipping, and to some extent deal with customer complaints, returns, things like that. It's not a bad way to go, although I'm thinking about going back to my own website again and going to one of these services that really helps you design and build a website. There are lots of those out there. I haven't looked at it real seriously yet because I just don't feel like I've got the time to do it. But I think it might save me money and might alleviate some of the headaches of having to deal with a middleman. But another option that's similar would be eBay. Now eBay is generally an auction site, but you can list buy it now with fixed prices. And I don't do a lot on eBay. I never found I did all that well selling forged ironwork on eBay, but I've seen other people that seem to do really well selling their stuff on eBay. So it's just up to you which platform you prefer, whether it's your own website, Etsy, eBay, or even Facebook Marketplace, which I have no experience in, but it does exist. And for any of those online options, if you're active on social media, if you've got people who follow you on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, wherever that is, and you talk about the things you're making, you show pictures of it being made or little short video clips making the stuff, showing the finished product, and occasionally mention that it's for sale. Don't make it all about sales. You'll chase your viewers away in most cases. But if you're posting the stuff, people are going to say, how can I buy that? And then you can redirect them to Etsy or eBay or Facebook Marketplace or your website, or send me a direct message and we'll talk about how to do this. And then you can eliminate the middleman, but it becomes a little bit more work at that point. Now, regardless of how you're selling these things, it generally pays to have a fairly good inventory of this stuff. Selling on Etsy, if you just have one hook listed, you're not going to get much traffic, and people that look at that, but maybe that's not the hook they want, they're not going to have other options to choose from. So if you have all 6 of the things that we've made here listed on Etsy, that makes it look a little bit more serious, gives you a little bit more credibility, and people have some things to choose from. But that doesn't mean you can't also have some of those things listed on Etsy. Doesn't mean you can't show them on your Instagram page or on your own website, or take them to a local craft show. Just be careful of inventory and don't sell the same one item multiple places so that you don't actually have things to ship people. So if you've got 10 each of 6 items, 60 items, maybe you list 5 each of them on Etsy and 5 each of them on eBay, and you don't go to a craft show while those listings are active. Now Etsy does have the advantage, you can put it on vacation mode, go to the craft show, if you sell stuff, you come back, adjust your inventory on Etsy, and then you're back to work selling it there. And you eliminate that risk of selling something at the craft show that somebody simultaneously bought on Etsy. Doubt that that happens often, but it's a real possibility. And it can really make you look bad when you don't actually have the thing somebody just bought. So now we have to talk about pricing. Keeping track of your expenses is vitally important when we're talking about pricing. It's also important to realize that the expense of getting to this point where you have something to sell is not the end of the expenses, unfortunately. If you sell it to friends, family, coworkers, like we talked about earlier, there are probably no additional expenses to selling. If you're going to a craft show, obviously there are those expenses of booth space, travel expenses, lunch while you're at the show, that kind of stuff, and you have to charge enough to cover that. If you're selling online, you're going to have listing fees, all of the online sites, whether that's Etsy, eBay, your own website using PayPal, they're all going to take 3 to 5%, something like that, out of the sale, in addition to whatever the listing fee was, depending on what site you're using. So you have to make sure you cover that. If you're going to ship it, you got to make sure you cover the shipping amount. You can either charge separate for shipping, or you can build it into the price and offer theoretical free shipping. There's no such thing as free shipping. Somebody's paying for it. So that just means it's built into the price. So if it's going to cost $5 to ship something and you want 10, you charge 15, or you charge 10 plus $5 shipping. Same price to the customer. Just depends on the psychology involved and which way you want to do that. But you're also going to have some expense in packaging these things. Now maybe you've got a whole bunch of, well, that's one of the downsides of recording over here in a shop without electricity. The lights are on battery power, and when the batteries go dead, the lights go out like that. But where was I? And another thing to consider are the shipping and packaging materials. You're going to have something to put your product in when you ship it. You're going to have packing tape. You're going to have to be able to make labels. Although a lot of this stuff you can just write with a Sharpie marker if you want to do it by hand. But one of the advantages to Etsy and eBay and their discounted shipping is all you really have to do is go in, say ship, make sure the package size and weight information is correct, print out the label with plain paper, and then just tape the label to the front of the box. And that guarantees that you're not going to mislabel the box. Whatever it prints is what the customer provided you. And that really helps when it comes time to verify that they actually got their product, or if they didn't get it, that it was because they didn't know their address, not because you made a typo. But anyways, you're going to have to spend a little money on something like padded mailers. And if you're here in the US, the flat rate mailers from the Postal Service are really pretty handy if the weight is high enough. Putting something that will ship first class mail in this means you now have to ship it priority mail, and that's going to cost more money. So if it's only 4 ounces, 8 ounces, something like that, this is a better deal. I think up to 13 ounces you can ship first class mail. And over that, these prepaid mailers really do pay off. Sometimes you're paying a little bit more for the shipping because the thing was light enough, and if you'd found your own box and packed it up that way, you could have shipped it for $1 or $2 less. But you're also not paying for the box when you buy these. The shipping includes the box. So you can go to your post office, pick up a dozen of these, 2 dozen of these things, and just have them on hand, and in different sizes. There's envelopes, there's small boxes, medium boxes, large boxes, and different configurations in some of those price ranges. So they're really handy. I use a lot of these things, and I go online and I order them in packs of something like 50 and just have those shipped to me. So I've got a bunch of these on hand all the time. But I also buy these in bulk too, just to make sure I have them. So you need to be aware of things like that, and that is going to add to what your overhead is to sell these things. So we've made them for about $500. I'm going to guess that by the time I've sold all of these, it's going to cost me another $200, $250 in the listing fees, the processing fees, all the Etsy fees, and the cost to ship them with the shipping materials. I'm going to keep track of that, and when we get to the next video, I'll tell you exactly what all of that cost me, or I'll come up with a good average, because it may be hard for me to separate out this stuff from my other things I'm selling, and I may just come out with a percentage average and then factor that into this, but it'll be pretty close to accurate. The good news, though, is that most of those fees occur after the sale. You have to buy the shipping material ahead of time, you have to pay the listing fee, which for Etsy is 20 cents per item to list it, but then their processing fees and shipping and all that is done after you've sold the items. So that's all coming out of the gross sales amount before they pay your cut. And my goal then is to sell everything that I made out of that 120-foot stick, 60 items. I'm going to try and sell them for right around $1,000. So $500 for forge, anvil, hammer, tongs, propane tank, materials, little vise, hacksaw, all that kind of stuff. About $250 for packing materials, sales fees, shipping, all of that kind of stuff. $750 in expenses, $1,000 in gross sales. That means we could make $250 in net profit, although I would immediately turn around and invest about half of that in more supplies, more fuel for the forge, so that I can keep going and I can do this again. And as you go and these tools are already paid for, your net profit goes up a little bit, unless you're really reinvesting heavily, which is certainly an option. But what those exact numbers are, we're just going to have to talk about after I've sold this stuff. That might be a week, might be a month, might be 2 months before I sell all of this, and that will be part of what I report on when we get to that part of this process. Don't be in a hurry. The one thing this isn't is a get-rich-quick scheme. This is a long-term process that you need to be committed to. So I'm going to set my online listings up for what I think this would be worth at a craft show, art show, or if I were selling it in person to a coworker or a friend, something like that. And I'm going to let the online platform, whether that's Etsy, eBay, wherever you're trying to sell them, do the shipping calculations for me. So make sure you know your package dimension, what it's going to weigh, and what kind of shipping service you're going to use. All of that stuff is available on their site, and it will estimate all of that for you, so you kind of have an idea where it's going. But you have an option of setting it up as free shipping or charge for shipping. On these little items, I'm going to let it charge for shipping. So the simple J-hook with the spade finial, including the screw to mount it to the wall, I'm going to price these at $12. And I think I'm going to carry that price on for the other hook that was made out of 6 inches of bar, 2 holes in the top, and the kind of flaring fishtail type scroll in the end. I think $12 is fine for that as well. I'm going to add these up in my calculator here. Then we have the little key fob. Now I did order a bunch of these split rings to put on these. I think I ordered 50 of them from Tandy Leather. It was something like $20, so that's not too expensive. But that's an added expense if you're going to include that with it. And I just don't know what to charge for these. I think people would like to buy these. I think they're a saleable item. And I'm going to go out on a limb and I'm going to charge $10 a piece for these. Some of these things just aren't worth your time to make if people aren't going to pay a fair price for it. And this is your chance to learn whether or not you're ever going to do some of these things again. The little leaf pendants or key rings, whatever you do with those, you can include the little split ring on these as well if you want to. I think this is going to be one of my more expensive items. I'm going to charge $20 a piece for these. The little hook made out of the remaining 4 inches that tapers down to a square end and has a nice little flare to it. Very simple, not quite as dramatic, I don't think, as the other two, although quite honestly, I think this is my favorite of the bunch because it is so simple. But I think I'm going to price that at $10. And that leaves the bottle opener. If you do a good job on these, I think they're worth $25, maybe even a little bit more. If they're a little wonky and a little crude, you might not be able to charge as much. But I'm going to go $25 on these, plus the shipping cost. So one of each item, I'm coming up with $89. So that's $890 to sell all 60 items, and the customer will pay for the shipping on top of that. We'll see how all of this balances out. We'll see what the net profit is. But remember to keep track of all of your expenses. If you have to pay money to make this happen, write it down somewhere, keep track of it, know what your expenses are so that you're not losing money. If you decide this hook, you think you didn't do a very good job. This hook is only worth $5 and you list it on eBay and it costs you $2 in fees to list it and you're only getting $3 a hook return on that, assuming the customer is paying extra for shipping. Is that worth your time to make? Maybe it is, maybe it isn't, but for me, I think this is worth more for my time. So it's better to take extra time making this look right than it is to settle for something less and try to sell it cheap, because that approach will probably hurt you in the long run, and it hurts everybody else trying to sell forge work. There should be kind of a universal price scale on some of this stuff that says average quality work, average price. If your work is much higher quality, charge more. There are people out there who would probably get $50 for a hook like this because they have the name and it is really a perfect hook. There's no lumps, bumps, the scrolls are perfectly bent, and they can command that kind of price. So as you get better, you can charge more. Anyways, I think I've talked long enough about this kind of stuff. Hopefully you found that interesting. Hopefully you can put some of this to work. And I really do think we can sell all of this. I don't think it's going to take all that long. I think it'll take more than a week or two. And maybe in a month or two I can get back to you and let you know if this really worked out the way I thought it would. But I actually need to finish these. I haven't finished putting the holes in them. Then I need to put the finish on them, get the screws ready. Then I need to start taking pictures because any online listing is going to need some good pictures of this. The better your product photography, the better you're going to be able to sell these things. So that's worth going back to today's sponsor, Skillshare, and taking some of those classes on product photography because they can tell you way more about it than I can. So thanks again to Skillshare for sponsoring the video. Hope you enjoyed it. Hope you have time in your day to get out to your shop. Stay safe, wear your safety glasses. We'll see you for the next video.